Welcome, and thank you for spending some of your time with us. My name is Tina Rosenquist, and this is Knowledge for Wellness. And this show is to better inform you, because when you know more, you are empowered to make better decisions for yourself and your loved ones for a better quality of life. And knowledge is power. And today's topic is on functional medicine. And questions we will be asking are, how is functional medicine different? And what is the most common complaint that you see? And why do so many people seem to be getting thyroid disease? And I am delighted to present Dr. Robert Bruley from Bruley Center, located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Welcome, Dr. Bruley.
Well, thank you, Tina.
I'm so delighted you could come on Knowledge for Wellness and educate my viewers.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Great. But this is your first time on Knowledge for Wellness, and I'd really like for you to tell my viewers a little bit about yourself and your love and your passion, and even some of your credentials as well.
All right. I am both an MD and a chiropractor, and I'm board certified in holistic medicine.
Nice.
I was in the first graduating class from the Mayo Medical School back in the 70s, which dates me, unfortunately.
Yeah. Experience, though, too.
Experience,
yes.
That's it. And years later, after seeing that I needed to know more about manual medicine and I wanted to learn more about more alternative practices, I ended up deciding to get my chiropractic degree. So 25 years after I went to medical school, I started chiropractic school and graduated from that in 2001.
Nice.
And during that process, they also offered me a faculty position, and then I learned not only how hard it is to teach, but I also learned about the whole concept of adrenal fatigue, which led me into the world of functional medicine.
Okay. Wow. That's amazing. And where did you graduate from?
I graduated from Northwestern Chiropractic College, now Northwestern Health Sciences University, and then Mayo Medical School for my medical school.
Okay, so you actually practice both integrative and functional medicine, correct?
Yes, and to me, there shouldn't be really a distinction. It's healthcare.
Yes.
Alternative, traditional, it's just healthcare. But why not use the simplest, easiest, safest, most natural first and try to act on the side of prevention as opposed to being reactive on the side of trying to beat back disease if you have that option.
Yes. Because the patient is the most important person, and to get them back to a better quality of life.
Absolutely, and one of the aspects of this practice is that it's individually centered, so that everybody is different. There's no average patient, there's no average person,
right.
And everything we do is set for that particular person.
Okay. So could you define for my viewers, functional medicine or integrative, and some people even call it complementary as well?
Sure, or holistic medicine.
Yes.
You can throw lots of different terms at it. And functional medicine would probably be a way of practicing that. The whole idea of integrative medicine is let's integrate those things which have been shown to work. So it might be Western medicine, if that's most appropriate.
Sure.
It might be Eastern medicine, if that's appropriate. It could be manual medicine, if that would be appropriate. So you're bringing to the table what you need to make the person do better and feel better. And functional medicine really is a way of looking at the practice of medicine in that by helping the body function better, we can impact the course of illness, hopefully prevent it from occurring, or certainly impact its worsening and hopefully slow that progression, as well as maximizing somebody's vitality, because health is way more than just the absence of disease. It's a positive sense of well-being. And so that's what we try to do by helping the body's organs and systems function better. So we look at digestion, detoxification, hormone balance, immunity, nutritional sufficiency, the way the cells talk to each other, all as a way of helping the body work better so that many times the body can self-correct its own problems.
Yes, the body is a magnificent tool, and what a great way to interject with all of the different modalities to get back a good quality of life.
It is, and and even though at times the practice of it can be rather complex, the concept of it is common sense and very simple. Let's just help our body work better and the body will do better.
And I love the idea that all of them can work collaboratively together to get that person back to where they need to be.
Yes.
You know, no matter if it's Western medicine or holistic, complementary, or spiritual, whatever that person needs, because we all lack a little bit something when we actually come down with a disease.
It's true, and none of us stay the same. Everything's in motion. We get older, our days change, our stresses change, we fall, we slip, we catch colds. All these things, everything is always changing, and so it's helping modulate those changes or people navigate them, or to navigate them in a more healthful and happy manner, I suppose.
Yeah. And so why is it that you chose, you know, just this actual profession of medicine?
Well, I was always interested in that. Even back in college, my thesis was on alternative medicine.
Okay.
I got away from that. You get into medical school and you realize, like, wow, this stuff's kind of dangerous, so you don't want to hurt anybody first. And so the idea of prevention kind of got put on the back burner because instead you want to focus first on those things you need to do immediately to save lives.
Right.
Like an emergency room situation. But what I noticed over the years of doing more standard family practice is how many people fell through the cracks.
Oh, yes.
In other words, people would come in and they would have these symptoms, but they wouldn't necessarily have a disease. But they would still feel poorly, or they would feel crummy, and all their tests would be quote unquote normal, and yet they felt just as bad as they did when they came in. So I wanted to approach my perception differently because I felt like I wasn't seeing what was clearly there, or I had not been so far trained to see. And that's why I started approaching practice in this particular way. It just kind of opened my eyes a little bit.
Yeah, I love the idea that you say you hadn't been trained to see it that way as well, because you're only as good as your teachers or what you've been taught. And so functional medicine kind of opened up another door for you?
Well, it did. It opened up many new doors. It's almost like unraveling the layers of an onion. You can keep going deeper and deeper, and then all of a sudden you realize that we're not one organ system at a time.
Yes.
So much of traditional medicine, let's say, will focus on the practice of the heart, cardiology, the practice of the lungs, pulmonary medicine, the practice of the endocrine glands, endocrinology, and yet we're not just one organ. Every one of those systems affects something else, and so I try to look at the whole, and I think that's where the term holistic comes from.
Yes, because you look at a mind, spirit, and body, because each of us have our different beliefs and our different ways of thinking, and one thing that could stress out another person, it just runs off another person's shoulder.
And there's no way to separate mind and body. Everything affects everything else. I remember a study years ago in which they were looking at the effectiveness of white blood cells in a petri dish in the laboratory for fighting off infection. And the first thing, they looked at people who were depressed, and they found that their white cells were lethargic and they didn't communicate well, and they took more cells to do a lesser amount of killing of the bad bacteria. And then they looked at people who had just fallen in love when they had that euphoric stage, and their white cells were like Super Bowl champions. They were right on the infection. They communicated really well. It was quick, effective, and it took fewer cells to do the job. And I always remember that because it made me just think how much our mind affects our body. But of course, if you don't feel well, well, of course, after a while, you're going to be kind of depressed and bummed because you don't feel well. So there's just no separating. So we try to approach everything as best we can at the same time.
Yes. And I love the idea, too, is that you probably look at someone functional medicine a little different than you did as an MD.
Well, correct. And I still look at everything as an MD. We always try to rule out the worst things that we have to deal with right away. And at times, as people know, that can be alarming because then they worry about something that it turns out they usually don't have. But we always want to make sure, because you don't want to miss those things. So to me, I'm just a doctor, and in many cases, I'm almost like a coach with somebody, because when I have somebody comes to see me, we're a team, we're a partnership. And what really comes down to the fact that I end up acting as their advisor, their coach, and make recommendations that they can implement as best fits their time frame, their energy, their resources, or what to them is the most important thing too.
Exactly, because I know people that are having some digestive problems, probably never even thought to detox.
Right.
And let's get the body clean right there in a detoxification if you're having food allergies or something of that nature. And then you start over after they detox, and maybe they even feel a little bit better right away.
Which then gives them more energies or things to address other problems. And if you feel better a little bit, then that's very hopeful too.
Yes, exactly.
Because you start moving to where every little thing you do helps make something else better.
Yes.
And then you're moving in a positive direction, and that's really what we're after.
And we want to address the thyroid too, because that seems to be quite an up-and-coming occurrence that people are having a lot more thyroid disease. So can we talk a little bit on that?
Oh, sure. It's well, one of the things that I think that's important is to realize the most common complaint that I see of people is fatigue.
Oh, yes.
People are tired, they're flat, they can't bounce back, and there are lots of stresses in the world. It doesn't necessarily have to be psychological stress. A big common stress I see is people don't sleep enough.
Yes.
Or they don't sleep well enough. And so fatigue is a big issue, and one of the things we look at, of course, is the thyroid, because many things impact the thyroid. And when I started out my training or my career decades ago, I don't recall seeing this much thyroid disease. I realized to a certain extent I wasn't recognizing it because I'm looking at it more different ways now.
Sure.
But I just think it's more prevalent now. And we've seen associations now with environmental toxicity issues. There's association of thyroid dysfunction with flame retardants, with triclosan, which is what they put in the antibacterial soaps, with the bisphenol A, which is a plasticizer, which has been shown to be an endocrine disruptor. And we don't get nearly as much iodine as we should in our diet, especially here in Minnesota, the so-called goiter belt of the United States. And people are cutting back on their salt consumption because they've been told it's not healthy for them. And in fact, much commercial cooking or processed food doesn't use iodized salt anyway. And even if we get, let's say you want to eat fresh vegetables, eat fresh lettuce, well, most of the lettuce in the winter comes from the Salinas Valley of California, and they're not adding iodine in that soil, they're adding nitrogen and phosphorus so it grows better. So I think iodine deficiency will then make you more susceptible to what we call goitrogenic halogens, a big term for chemicals that can mess up your thyroid gland function by actually fooling the body into thinking they're iodine. They get incorporated into your thyroid hormone, but they have no biological activity. And these are things that are everywhere. Chlorine and fluoride, both in our water supply, and bromine, which is in a lot of medications even. It's in certain soft drinks. It's in a lot of processed foods. So all these things, I think, are impacting us at the same time, which create a problem.
Yes. And I just received an email in regards to the fact that they're saying our fluoride in our water now, and now this is the long-term effects that we're talking about, because it seems to be more and more common that not just women are actually coming down with a thyroid disease.
One thing that seems to be especially more prevalent, and I wish I could say I definitively had the answer, is autoimmune thyroiditis or Hashimoto's disease, especially in women. Women really deal with a lot more issues than men, I think, in many cases. Something like 90% of autoimmune disease occurs in women. And so we're seeing more of this autoimmune thyroiditis, which is essentially when your thyroid gland becomes allergic to itself. And there are thoughts on why this is occurring, potential food allergies, especially to gluten, which is in wheat, rye, and barley,
We're hearing
can be
a
an
lot
issue.
more on gluten intolerance as well.
It's and I think the environmental toxicity issues, but that the autoimmune issues of the thyroid are very prevalent. I check everybody for it, and I find it way more commonly than I recall ever seeing it years ago.
And you're finding it more prevalent in women?
Women especially. And I think women, of course, are multitasking. They're trying to have careers, be mothers. They have more hormonal changes, especially after menopause. Then they stop sleeping as well, and everything affects everything else. And so I think it's, but thyroid is one of the ways it often comes out.
So now you're talking about women, so of course we want to talk about the fact of going through menopause and hormone replacements. So you practice a little bit more on that aspect of it, helping women with that?
Yes, I do.
You know, when you're going through it, it's basically hot flashes that will bring them to you.
It's hot flashes, sleep disturbance. Some women feel like they're going crazy. One of the classic signs of low estrogen is brain fog. Women have problems finding words, or they just feel like there's some fog on their brain that was not present before. They know they're not themselves.
Yes.
And they don't want to continue to feel that way, and I don't blame them at all.
No, because one thing of getting older is harden up, but not to feel as though you're as sharp as you used to be.
Right,
well.
exactly.
Yeah. Now your hormone replacement, is that bioidentical hormones? Or
that's pretty much what I do. It's kind of a buzzword some people don't like, so sometimes we'll call it 17-beta estradiol for the bioidentical form of the most potent estrogen, which is estradiol. But I only use hormones that are natural to a woman's own body. I don't like to use hormones that are manufactured or have been altered in the lab to allow them to be patented, unless that's advantageous. But in hormones, I don't think it is. Now realize that there are bioidentical hormones that are prescription medicines made by major companies that are in the physician's desk reference. And so I often will use those, such as the Viveldot or natural Prometrium, which is a bioidentical progesterone. So it's not meaning that we're coming up with these weird things that are not recognized by traditional medicine. I just feel they're a better choice.
Right. And in regards to that woman, you know, we want to talk a little bit about hormones and, you know, if they're all the same or exactly, you know, to describe that to my viewers as well.
Well, they're not all the same.
Yes.
The hormone replacement issue really got a lot of press back about 10 years ago when this major study that many people have heard of, the Women's Health Initiative, was terminated early because they actually found adverse effects from the hormones being used. The problem was the hormones are being used was Premarin, which is an estrogen from the urine of pregnant horses, which are clearly different in makeup than the estrogens in a woman's natural body. And have a different effect. And they used a synthetic progestin, which is a chemically changed molecule similar to progesterone that was able to be patented. And they did show some adverse effects with that. And so what we do is we try to use the things that have been shown in studies primarily overseas that have been shown not to be harmful. In the United States is the only country in the world that primarily uses for hormone replacement either horse estrogens or synthetics. The rest of the world, Europe, Australia, South America, Asia, they're using bioidentical hormones, so that's where the studies come. So we use natural estrogens. Perhaps we might use estradiol or estriol. We'll use natural progesterone, and we'll use natural testosterone, but as needed for that individual person. We actually will measure this, we'll see what they need, but we also go along by how they're feeling and what their symptoms are. So we use lots of different checks and balances to do this as precisely as possible.
Yes, because we're all individuals, and you know what, my test results wouldn't be the same as my girlfriend's.
Right, exactly.
You know, so you look at us individually doing the test, and then actually what you prescribe to us.
Right, and there's a big difference. For example, in the Women's Health Initiative, they used oral estrogens. And I personally don't believe in using oral estrogens ever, even bioidentical oral estrogens, because they increase the risk of clots. So by using a patch or a cream, all things being equal, you're minimizing, if not eliminating, the risks of heart attack, stroke, and blood clots. Likewise, using natural progesterone as opposed to a synthetic progestin does the same thing. So just even the form of the administration of the hormone aside from the type of hormone it is also important.
Okay. So run me through a few of your tests that you do. Do you do the saliva test or exactly?
What I found, I use a saliva test as my test of choice for adrenal dysfunction.
Okay.
Meaning when people are under sufficient stress that they're tired and unable to bounce back. That's an oversimplification, but what happens is your adrenals are little nut-shaped glands in your kidneys that produce your stress hormones that prepare you for fighting or for fleeing.
Right.
In our society, where the stresses never end and people are needing to keep up to the computer-driven pace around us that's impossible
Yes.
for a human being to keep up with, eventually the adrenals more or less burn out. And so we see abnormalities in cortisol secretion. And it was my own adrenal fatigue that led me into this practice when I was very tired, and my own family physician didn't recognize it because they don't teach this in medical school.
Okay.
And yet it was the other chiropractic faculty members who said, well, you have adrenal fatigue. And I said, what's that? And that's what I had. So for adrenals, cortisol by saliva, I think, is the best test.
Okay.
For looking at estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, I really prefer a 24-hour urine test.
Okay.
A lot of traditional doctors will do blood tests, and those are very helpful. But what I find is that they are just a snapshot of one moment in time. And so we know that most hormones tend to be highest in the morning, so you do a blood test then, hoping you're catching the high point. But everybody's morning is different. If you're a woman who woke up at 4 a.m. and can't go back to sleep, your morning is considerably different than somebody who gets up at 11 a.m.
Yes.
So it's difficult to see. So I use a 24-hour urine test as needed. I do standard blood tests, meaning the ones we would do through hospitals in many cases.
Sure.
But what a 24-hour urine test will show for hormones is very important. It will show a woman's estrogen metabolism.
Okay.
So when a woman, and a man for that matter, but we don't know where our levels are because we have so much fewer estrogens. So when a woman breaks her hormones down, she breaks them into forms that are ones that are felt to be cancer preventative or anti-inflammatory, or forms that are cancer promoting and pro-inflammatory. And so we want to make sure that a woman is breaking her estrogens down into the good types and not the bad types, particularly if we give her more estrogens.
Okay.
So you can do that in a 24-hour urine. And then if the ratio is not where we want it, we make dietary changes or do supplements to hopefully down the line prevent a woman's risk of developing any hormone-related cancer such as breast cancer.
Okay. So you were talking about nutrition. So that's very, very important for a female.
That's critically important.
Yes. So actually, what is the most common nutritional deficiency that you see with a patient coming in?
I would say essential fatty acids, fish oils, omega-3s, and probably the other one would be phytonutrients, antioxidants from brightly colored fruits and vegetables.
Okay.
It's really hard to get enough. I mean, recommendations are really kind of unrealistic. 6 to 12 or 13 half-cup servings of fruits and vegetables daily. I mean, who has time to shop and chop and chew, you know, all those things?
Right.
But that's really what some people need to be healthy. So those are things when I test, because I do functional vitamin analyses, those are the ones I really see that tend to be low.
Okay.
The whole idea about that part of nutrition and what we do, it's like if you look at a map in a city, there are lots of ways to get to the city.
Yes.
You don't always have to go down highway so-and-so. You can go sideways.
Scenic route.
Yeah, and go the scenic route and take your own rate, and everybody prefers a different approach. And so we can tailor our approach to the individual.
Okay. And so what would you recommend for a woman? You said fish oil. Anything else that you can
Well, I like to take some form of a super green food.
Okay.
I personally like one called Dynamic Greens, but there are many other companies that make it so you get the phytonutrients from the organic fruits and vegetables. You don't get the fiber, but it's a good way of, let's say you're in a hurry, you just take your little teaspoon of it. The stuff we use has 30 servings of organic fruits and vegetable in terms of the phytonutrients.
Okay.
So I think that's really helpful. Healthy bacteria, probiotics, I think are important. Foodborne illness is a big problem.
Yes.
Depending on what your needs are or diet, multivitamins very important.
Yes.
For a woman approaching or after menopause, calcium is important. And then the biggest thing is now that traditional medicine is very quickly recognizes vitamin D.
Yes.
We used to think that 98% of the function of vitamin D had to do with bone, and now it appears that 98% of the function of vitamin D has to do with everything except bone. Cancer prevention, or prevention of influenza, prevention of diabetes, prevention of inflammatory bowel disease. The list goes on and on. So that's an important one, and that's a frequent deficiency too.
Yeah.
But people have gotten kind of the message on that. I see a lot of people coming in who are really taking vitamin D.
Oh, that's great.
So that's hopeful.
Yes, very much so. Want to give them back the quality of life. Well, I'm afraid we only have a couple minutes left, and so if you want to throw anything out to my viewers, do a quick shout out to them, that'd be great.
Well, I think that the thing to remember is ultimately each individual is in charge of his or her own health.
Yes.
And you have to take ownership of that. You want to do everything you can to be as healthy as you can, sleep well, laugh well, take adequate vacations, and eat good food. It becomes you, figuratively and literally. Just take care of yourself and try to avoid putting bad things in your body, and keeping a good attitude about things, I think, would be the big things.
Oh, that's good to know. Well, I want to thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
This has been great with your insight of all of this as well.
Well, it's been my pleasure being here.
Thank you.
Okay.
If you have any questions or would like to contact the Bruley Center, please contact them at www.bruleycenter.com or call them at 612-455-0444. And please tune in to my other shows of Knowledge for Wellness being televised throughout the Twin Cities. And you can also see my previous shows on YouTube. And visit my website at www.knowledgeforwellness.com. And you can also connect with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And the mission of Knowledge for Wellness is to inform viewers on health issues, to expose, educate, and make viewers aware, to enhance themselves and their loved ones for a better quality of life. And I hope we have provided you with more information to benefit you and your loved ones. Remember, health is wealth. Until next time, be well and goodbye. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Over time you've healed so much in me, and I am living proof that although my darkest hour had come, your light could still shine through. And at times it's just enough to cast the shadow on the wall. Though I am grateful that you shine your light on me at all. Who am I that you would love me so gently? Who am I that you would recognize my name? Lord, who am I that you would speak to me so softly? Conversation with a love most high.